As I walked past the conference room, my life went from shit to a damn borax, Scottish for truly a huge damn mess. I saw Bill showing pictures on the big screen from the wedding he attended yesterday. What caught my attention was what was in the background. My nemesis Darren Bryant was hugging my wife Judith as they headed to the hotel on the trail. Bill knew Judith, so he knew what was going on. No one said anything to me about it. Friends and co-workers. I realized from the laughter of the group that they had all seen it and already knew. Not only that, it was old news. I didn't stop. If they did see me, they didn't give me any sign. I dismissed the idea of them seeing me and laughing at me. I found out later that it was the damn truth. Donald Harvey, our manager, had me covering Bryant all the time. That day I had to cover him again. Harvey canceled my vacation because Bryant had an emergency class. Judith left on her own. Or did I think she did now? I spent the rest of the day not doing any work but plotting revenge against my cheating wife, that bastard, and my so-called co-workers. I didn't want to work here a minute longer than I had to. I went to HR and asked about my notice period and annual leave. I knew I was due at least 7 weeks. It turned out that Harvey hadn't canceled my vacation. I showed Stella his letter canceling his vacation and explaining the reason. She just looked at me sadly. Even she freaking knew. I was absolutely furious. I discussed everything with her and her roommate, the financial controller. I am highly organized. It makes my job so much easier. Maybe it is right that I suffer from OCD. I keep records of all my work and expenses. I was able to prove that Harvey was falsifying records to stop payments to me, which were then transferred to Bryant. Eventually, they were able to confirm that I was due 9 weeks of 3 days annual leave. I was owed over £17,000, which was paid to Bryant. Stella had printed everything out. I copied them down as I didn't trust anyone else. My termination period was 12 weeks as I had specialized skills. I went back to my desk and wrote my resignation letter. I didn't give it to Harvey, whom I just stared at until he was completely embarrassed. I had always been obedient. The only time I complained was when I had to fill in for Bryant. I went to meet with the CEO, David Bennett, one of the members of the family that owned the company. His secretary told me he was busy. I told her I needed to see him urgently. Otherwise, I would contact a lawyer. She was very surprised at my tone. It was a very different me. She spoke to him again. He told her that he would be free in 20 minutes and for me to come in then. I knew from his tone that something was wrong. Later, when I thought about it, he tried not to laugh. I went back in and he kept me waiting. 10 minutes later, he let me in. There was no handshake. Sorry for the wait. Well, Adam, what's got you so riled up? He smirked. I was actually calm, which surprised me. Here's my resignation letter. I've been shit on enough already. I've had my vacation canceled supposedly in the best interest of the firm. Everyone laughs behind my back when Darren Bryant entertains my wife, and I have to cover his work while he does it. Harvey forges payroll so Bryant gets paid for my work, so you owe me over £17,000. You'll see those invoices there. Given my annual leave, despite Harvey trying to give it to Bryant, I have just over 2 weeks to work. I'll work them off, but I'm not going to cover Bryant. He could get in trouble. He could get in a very serious accident. Bennett was not only silent, he was gloating. I could tell by the look on his face that he was thrilled with how I felt. You didn't know Bryant was entertaining your wife, did you? Dude, you're damn blind. He brags about it every damn time. I'll handle your money, now get out of here. Well, I knew where I stood. I'd have 2 weeks to get back at all these cunts, especially Bryant. I walked out of that office and his secretary almost shit herself. If I was angry before, it was obvious from the look on my face that I was looking for trouble. I walked back to my desk. I could see the others watching me, but no one approached me. They had never seen me angry before. I finished my work on time. Harvey made me use my personal phone for work to save the firm money, since my phone could have 2 SIM cards. I took one out and left it on my desk. I didn't give them a second more than they needed. As I left, I saw some people looking at me like I was a stranger. Bill inquired, "For once you're leaving on time, Adam. What's wrong?" "I have an appointment," I replied gruffly, and continued walking. It was late evening on Thursday. Even the banks were open. I walked into the bank, met with the assistant, and opened new accounts in my name only. When she showed me the balance in the joint account that Judith and I maintained, it was very low. I saw missed payments. I asked why it was not being funded from her account as mandated. Judith canceled her mandate 10 months ago. The girl apologized as she should not have told me about it. I told her it was okay and I would not denounce her. The anger I felt was growing. I walked out of the bank and headed home. I needed to think and make a plan. I need to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm Adam Holliday, 29 years old, nice looking. I keep myself fit by going to the gym 3 or so nights a week and doing a bit of running. I am a mechanical engineer with high electrical and computer skills, troubleshooting large machines. I work with very expensive computerized machines that many local repairmen don't have the specialized skills for. As a result, I have to travel a lot. I guess I am one of those people who is never seen, who is always in the background. I never stick out, I just do the job damn well. I am, as you've read, taken for a fool. But I'm not. I'm just conscientious and made the damn mistake of trusting the whore and my co-workers at work. I wanted our company to do well. I'll help anyone except Darren Bryant, who I've hated since our childhood paths crossed. I can't call him an asshole since assholes are useful. Judith had long ago treated me like something nasty that she stomped on. Now I knew why. I tried to talk to her, but she always managed to avoid talking to me. She was used to getting her way. At first, I let her do it because I loved her and wanted to see her happy, but lately just to avoid her sharp tongue. I realize it sounds like I'm a spineless weakling, but I always wanted her to have what she wanted. I thought that's what love was all about, making the other person happy. Apparently, in her world, that's not the case. Once home, I headed to my office. I often worked from home as there was less interference. We didn't have children, thankfully, so I had remodeled one room. Tonight, I was going to work on the most important plan of my life. If Judith had had a brief affair with someone else, I might be able to let her convince me to see a psychologist to try to repair the damage done and rebuild our marriage, even though it was unlikely. I tried to talk her into discussing our marital problems, but she was always too busy. However, she knew I hated Bryant with every breath I took, so this was beyond repair. It was a deliberate act designed to hurt me like hell. The fact that it was him hurt more than the fact that she was having fun with someone else, and that was painful enough. After the revelation at the bank, I checked all the bank statements for 2 years. I copied the relevant transactions into an Excel file. I reviewed the credit card bill and did the same. I checked the payments to this hotel against my work schedule and found that there were 6 to 10 per month, no less. Many of them came on days when I was filling in for Bryant at other facilities. I'm sure they laughed that I was paying them for their entertainment. I hoped he paid at least sometimes, but knowing him, I doubted it. So today I was going to one of his jobs when I got a call canceling my order because they had to self-isolate due to the COVID outbreak at the factory. Without that, I wouldn't have gotten into the office to see that picture. I had also covered Bryant the previous day. There were quite a few deals when Judith was on vacation that Harvey made me cancel. One of them involved a photographer. Given the time difference, I thought he might be at work. I called and told the receptionist who I was. I apologized, but we had a fire and lost the pictures he took. Can they stay in his archives? The receptionist checked the records and they are still there. If she printed them out and sent them to me, it would be expensive. But if she emailed them, I could print them myself or have the firm do it. I thanked her and asked her to email them to me. It would be easier for both of us since international shipping can be difficult. I opened the file to all the information I had gathered. The pictures confirmed my suspicions. Bryant's course was to entertain my wife at my expense. One of Judith's perks is having the latest car. She leases them. Last year, she forgot her driver's license and bank cards, so everything was put in my name. Not surprisingly, she hasn't made a single payment on the car. The lease expires in 2 months. I thought that was great. For the next 2 months, I'll have use of my car, but I won't renew the lease. I needed access to her account. When we got married, she wanted her own account so she wouldn't have to explain to me how she spends her money. She works for an advertising agency. So we agreed to keep our own account and pay into a joint account for household needs, council tax, food, utilities, vacations, etc. I changed all passwords for computer, phone, and safe access. I checked that the prenuptial agreement that Judith's father had insisted on was in place. I copied it and saved it in a new folder. I gave it a technical name, which Judith would assume was a working name if she managed to find out my login details. The file itself was given another access password. I put all the documents I would need, including this file, into cloud storage, using a VPN to cover my tracks, so I had access to a copy of everything whenever I needed it. I use a key generator, so no Mom 1 or Mom 2 for me. I counted up all the money Judith owed me. It came out to just over £47,000. She, or rather I, had been paying for this hotel room for 14 months. The vacation alone cost £11,000. We had a joint savings account with £105,000 in it. They were to go towards extending this house. My idea, because it has big rooms and a large plot. Plenty of room for our kids to play when she feels she can have them. We talked about kids before we were married, but she changed her mind soon after and became more career-oriented. If I didn't like it, well, fine. Why did I put up with her crap for so long, I asked myself. She wanted to buy a rabbit hole in a posh neighborhood. I refused, which annoyed the hell out of her. It was probably one of the few times I stubbed my toe. So the house fund went unused. She didn't replenish it for a year either. I added £6,000. Now looking at her wishes, you can tell that if we moved, her name would be put on the property. My house would pay for most of the costs. She could claim a share in this new house when we divorced. A lucky escape. I transferred £105,000 into my new account. If she complained, I would say that her share would cover her debt to me. When I completed all the necessary money movements, I canceled the debit and credit cards of the joint account. I realize now that I should have paid attention to the accounts, but Judith did it all. Why the hell did I trust her, especially considering the way she treats me? When I finished, Judith wasn't home yet, so I put the pizza in the oven. If no one called Bryant, she wouldn't know I was in the loop. If she didn't come home, then they knew. I was just finishing my pizza when she arrived. To say she was shocked would be putting it mildly. She gasped, "I thought you were at the office." I smiled. "I had an appointment, and I left my phone there. No big deal." She relaxed. "I've already eaten. I'm going to take a shower," and almost jogged towards our room. I guessed why. I waited until I heard the sound of the shower. As she entered the room, she dropped her purse on the table as usual. I opened it and pulled out my wallet and cell phone. I logged into the computer under her account. I used her bank card to work with the card reader to access her accounts. She had the ones I knew about as well as 2 accounts that each held over £100,000. I copied all these accounts into my file. I downloaded the contents of her email. I opened her phone. She used the same PIN code on all her devices and sent copies of messages and calls to my file in the same way. I replaced everything in her purse and was sitting down with a cup of tea when she came downstairs. She was dressed rather drab compared to her work clothes. I decided to give her a pep talk. I'm not worth a little fancy dressing up for. She only looked at me in her usual dismissive manner. "I'm too tired. Maybe one more night." I laughed. "Yeah, why not? It's only been 12 months since you gave me access to your body. I think it's time for us to get a divorce, or I can get your marriage annulled since you're still a virgin." She stared at me, trying to figure out what was behind my words. She wasn't happy, and I didn't care. I continued. Bill was showing pictures from the wedding yesterday in the office when I came in. She looked at me. I didn't think you'd be interested. I didn't think I would. Is this Marion's third wedding? Maybe this time she'll keep her legs shut for someone other than the cool guy who married her. She gave me a hard look. What a nasty thing to say. I've never heard you talk about someone like that before. I added, I heard she was up to some mischief at her bachelorette party. You went and blabbed. She got angry. You don't need to listen to gossip. Everything went off without incident. I let loose another arrow. That's not what the gossip at the water cooler said. I hope she and the rest of the contestants were tested for STDs. Judith left for the bedroom, slamming the door behind her. I've hit a nerve, I thought. I went back to my office and researched the divorce laws. The good news was that I owned the house before we were married, so she had no rights to it. Usually property is divided 50-50 if there are no children. This was good since her two major accounts were in my favor. Alimony could be awarded if one spouse earned more than the other. The prenuptial agreement spelled out changes to the standard agreement based on adultery. No alimony was awarded for the innocent party. No claim to other property, such as an automobile. All expenses were placed on the adulterer. I was glad her father insisted on this. I knew I needed more evidence as Judith, Bennett, and Bryant would deny everything. In the morning, I called my old friend Danny, a local plumber. He used to work at this hotel a lot. When we met at the pub, his stories about the things he retrieved from the toilets amused everyone. I went to sleep in the guest room. I wasn't going to give the ice maiden any chance to melt. The next morning, I went to work, and my own work at that. I guessed from Judith's, I thought you were at the office comment that my phone was tapped. I checked my SIM card, but found no tracker on it. When I inserted a working SIM card, I found it hidden as described on the internet. I bought a phone for £20 and put the company's SIM card in it. I left this phone at work. On the way to work, I called Danny. I explained what Judith and Bryant were up to. Danny hates Bryant too. Bryant was the school bully until I beat the crap out of him. Next time he'd be reassigned to the other gender. Danny was going to the hotel that day, so he'd have news for me later. He had an idea for evidence. I was back in the office by 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Work was going smoothly for a change. I went to the finance department and gave them my new account details. I left strict instructions not to share these details with anyone. My tone surprised the girls. I left at 5 in the evening. Danny called and suggested we have a pint of beer later, and I agreed to meet at 8 in our neighborhood. Judith wasn't home, so I made myself some dinner and settled down in front of the TV. She arrived around 7:30 and was surprised to see me again. I told her, I'm off. I have a hot date with a nymphomaniac. Maybe I'll see you Monday. She just looked at me. She smiled. So she's in for a disappointment then. I laughed. Maybe she'll be interested in me and not just herself. I walked away before I wet myself. She was angry. Bullseye. I was really starting to realize that my life was about to change for the better. Danny brought pints and we sat down in the corner, away from the others. Adam, you don't deserve this. You're a stand-up guy. You'll help anyone. No one at your job bothered to tell you that. Screw them. A lot of people hate Bryant. You remember Kate Duncan? He used to pull her hair and call her names at school. She works in a hotel. She's single, very pretty, with the body you dream of. She would never have fun with a married man like me. I told her about them and about you. She's still partial to you for some reason. Oh, yeah. You caught Bryant pulling her off the bench by the hair and beat the crap out of him. I'd never seen you angry before, but that day you looked like nothing was going to stop you. If he tried to hide behind a brick wall, you would have gone through it to get him. No one tried to stop you. They're booked in for next week, Wednesday and Thursday. She'll make sure they get a separate room. There will be a video camera hidden in it to capture them. After they're done, I'll make an emergency call to deal with the clogged toilet in the room. I'll pick up the camera and give you the SD card. It's so small it will fit in the smoke alarm that's on the bed. I told him, I owe you both. He smiled. No, that's what he deserves. I thought Judith had more intelligence. We had a couple more beers each, and I headed home. In the morning, she suggested we go to the car dealership and look for a new car since the lease was coming to an end. You don't mean my new car? It's registered in my name and you haven't paid a dime for it. We can go and I'll tell them I'll return it when the lease expires. She looked completely dumbfounded. She left without waiting for me. She came back 15 minutes later. My debit and credit cards don't work. What have you done? She shouted. I calmly replied, I was checking the account because I was sure I had paid the bill, but I got a letter asking me to pay it. I saw that you haven't paid anything on your house account in a year. I'm not going to support your lifestyle of treating me like crap. I canceled the cards. Use your own goddamn ones. She got even more pissed off. I very rarely swore at her. It must be the bank's mistake, she almost shouted. No, they showed me your order rescinding the mandate. No goddamn mistake. How? She screamed. I called them to find out the reason because I thought it was a mistake. Turns out the mistake was me trusting you with our finances. I felt like she was about to explode. The rest of the weekend we didn't talk. I mowed the grass and tidied up the garden. I painted the decking in front of our bedroom as the smell of decking paint made her sick. Monday at work, I tackled the paperwork. I also drafted emails to all my clients explaining why I would no longer be working at Bennett's after I was officially laid off. I will be looking for a job after that date. Several people tried to poach me, but because of my sense of loyalty, okay, I'll add stupidity, I didn't pursue the change. I sent them just before I left. Access to them was password protected, so no one would find out. I changed all my work codes. Harvey wasn't in the office. I felt cheated. I expected him to pounce on me with accusations that he had fired me and that he had cheated me out of my money. I looked for any opportunity to plop him on the table and rearrange his body parts. I went to see a lawyer. I've known Dawn since high school. I explained the circumstances. I needed a new will. If anything happened to me, I didn't want anything to go to Judith. Dawn quickly drafted a will detailing the reasons I was changing it so that any time I tried to revoke it in court, they would have a reason in front of them. The house I was going to leave to my nephew and niece, my sister's children. This would really annoy Judith as my sister hates her to the core. They have a small house, so this would allow them to move into it, but the title would remain with the children. I don't like her husband. Judith was legally entitled to a percentage of the cash before the divorce, but Dawn showed me how to reduce the amount classified as cash. When we were done with the details, she had her secretary type it all up. If I came in later in the afternoon, I could sign it, and it would be witnessed and notarized. I did so, and the document was duly signed. Dawn started talking about the divorce. I told her everything I thought, and she said she would help me at friendly rates. She hated Bryant, too. I don't think anyone at school had a kind word to say about him. I admit I would have gone to his funeral, but only to help load him into the crematorium furnace. If he had been buried, I would have danced on his grave and peed on it. I talked about everything that had happened at Bennett's, the holiday and the hotel. I was hoping to have the videotape this week, and when I did, I was going to kick that whore out. I told her about the contents of Judith's cell phone. The messages between her and Bryant talked about the fun they were planning and how I was a cuckold and a loser. Judith was as bad as he was at humiliating me. The emails revealed that Harvey, Bennett, and Bryant made up the story so Bryant could go on vacation with Judith at my goddamn expense. They all had a damn good laugh about it. Dawn told me to email everything to her. She'll get the divorce papers ready. She'll also prepare the papers to sue Bennett and company for various unlawful employment practices. She'll know who to hand them to Judith, either at our house or at her place of employment. I laughed. Dawn looked at me. If their date on Wednesday is videotaped, can we file it when they leave the room on Thursday? Dawn laughed. I didn't realize you had such a vindictive streak in you. That's great. Danny and Kate set up the camera. It picked them up. Kate downloaded the content for Danny, who emailed it to me. Kate put the camera in place on the second attempt. Dawn filed the papers with the court on Thursday morning and received the court document later that morning. She asked for it as a favor. Bryant didn't seem to be liked anywhere. As they were leaving the hotel room in the afternoon, a sheriff's officer handed Judith the papers. She screamed and cried. "Who cares? Not me!" At Dawn's direction, he removed the house and car keys from her keychain. I left work early that day. I packed all her clothes in black garbage bags and left them by the front door for her to pick up. I kept her wedding ring, since it was a family heirloom, and the damn expensive diamond earrings, bracelet, and necklace that she just had to take with her on her honeymoon. I included all of her paperwork. My home phone rang and her parents' number popped up on the screen. I answered it. Her father yelled into the phone, "What the hell you got?" As I hung up, he called again and started the same thing. I hung up again. 6 times we did this dance until her sister Janine called. She at least tried to speak. "Adam, can you tell us what happened? Judith is confused. We can't understand what she's saying. She said something about a divorce. What happened?" I took a slow breath. "Janine, Judith has been treating me like crap for at least a year. Nothing I did was right. It turns out that for the last 14 or 15 months, she's been having an affair with Darren Dam Bryant. I just found out about it. There's a lot more, but we're done. You can come and get her things. The door locks have already been changed. I will enforce the prenup your father wanted to put in place to protect his whore." When I said that, you could hear him yelling at me. I hung up the phone. An hour later, Janine arrived on her own. She brought their big car. I helped her put all the stuff in it. She asked questions, and I explained to her. She shook her head. She was always a stupid, selfish cow. She had a great boyfriend, and she left him for a lowlife like Bryant. He's not fit to tie your shoelaces. I feel so sorry for you. After they left the hotel, Danny took the video camera, so we had 2 days of evidence. He gave me the video camera at Dawn's request. I picked up the car from the hotel parking lot and went to bed. Tomorrow at work would be interesting. Before entering the main office, I went to the kitchen and put some chocolates in a box. Lots of pretty chocolates. This office has a lot of sweet tooth. Too bad I changed the contents. They were laxative chocolates, very explosive. I poured a powder containing pepper on the toilet seats. I turned on the toilet paper and paper towel dispensers. I walked into the office and it was obvious that everyone was aware of what had happened the day before. They seemed shocked that I could have done something like that. They talked about it, but not about Bryant entertaining my wife with me. I opened my email and sent emails to my clients, then deleted the entry. I expected today to be my last day. I used a program to clear the computer's free space of anything that could still be recovered. Bennett walked out of his office with Harvey and Bryant. Everyone was furious. Bennett shouted, "Why couldn't you leave it alone, you cuckold? You're a goddamn loser. Why get a divorce? Nobody wants a loser like you." Bryant smirked. "Why did you call your divorce adultery? You're just admitting to the world that you're a cuckold. She needed a real man." I laughed. That pissed him off even more. He continued, "You could have just said irreconcilable differences. It doesn't change anything." I spoke calmly, but loud enough for everyone to hear. That cunt's name is here for a reason. Every place he works will be watching him. Every woman he looks at will know he will be entertaining them. That means the divorce will be in a few weeks, not a year. I'm not a damn loser. I put my trust in some idiots and got screwed. Rest assured, I'll get mine back. There's always tomorrow. You're just bastards." Bennett shouted, "You can get out. Don't expect any references or the money you say you're owed." I held out the letter from Dawn to him. I had a little video camera on me that filmed them, so I had proof that he'd gotten it. I spoke to them slowly, but loud enough for everyone to hear. This is a complaint of workplace bullying related to Bryant's solicitation of prostitution. I have all of your emails, messages, in which you arranged for him to take my place at that party. I turned to the audience. Everything you knew, and no one had the decency to tell me about it. Don't you ever bloody try to talk to me again. You are the lowest scum on earth. This place is a cesspool. How many others like you are covered by the wives or husbands of other so-called friends and co-workers? I could see that some of those words hit the mark. I'd hate to get a reference from here. When this comes up in court, who's going to use Bennett? I looked Bryant in the eye and smiled my best evil grin. Until we meet again, you little jerk. He crapped his pants. I stepped back. The fury on Bennett's face was absolutely adorable. I almost expected to hear him collapse to the floor with a severe stroke, not fatal, but hopefully enough to ruin the rest of his miserable goddamn life. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. I headed home. There were several calls on the answering machine. Janine was asking if I was okay and if Judith wanted to see me. One from her mom. Judith is so upset. Can we make up? I called Janine. I don't want to talk to that slut. We will never be together. She can have fun with Bryant and whoever she wants. I'm free of her. Janine understood. I decided to take a vacation and drove across the country in my car. It was actually not a bad car, comfortable and roomy. After 3 weeks, I returned to my house. A neighbor saw me pulling up and turned to me. Adam, some people tried to take over your house. I called the police. They took them away. The cops left their details for you to contact them. I thanked him. I called the police and spoke to one of the officers. It was Judith's father and brother. They had come because Judith wanted to take the engagement ring and diamond set that she claimed belonged to her. They did not try to break down the door, so they were advised to contact a real estate attorney. I thanked the officer. I was happy the bitch was off the hook. 6 weeks later, I was in court for a divorce hearing. Sitting in the press box was Dawn's sister Avril, a reporter for the local newspaper. This was going to be fun. Judith's attorney began by stating that his client did not want a divorce, that she had only lost her way a couple of times, and was very sorry for the pain she had caused. She would like the court to order counseling so we can forget about her recklessness. If the court feels it cannot do this, her husband will take £105,000 out of their joint account. She was due half that amount. Dawn stood up. Perhaps Mrs. Holliday could appear in court, and we could check her actions. Her lawyer quickly tried to prevent this. The sheriff noted his reluctance to have her as a witness. Dawn continued. My lord, this marriage is over. Mrs. Holliday had an affair with Darren Bryant, aided and abetted by Mr. Holliday's manager and owner of the firm. Bryant also works there. Mr. Holliday was fired from their job for having the audacity to divorce this adulteress rather than allow them to continue their games with him. This affair went on for about 15 months before her husband found out. It was a deliberate act on her part as she knew Bryant and her husband hated each other. It stretches back to their childhood days when Bryant was the school bully until Mr. Holliday dealt with him. With the connivance of his superiors, Mr. Holliday was forced to cancel a vacation trip intended to try to improve their relationship. Bryant went instead. My client was forced to work to fill in for Bryant, who was on an important course. Completely bogus. That was a year ago. The fact that she took Bryant on leave rather than her husband shows Mrs. Holliday's utter contempt for her husband. Since then, my client has had no intimate relations with his wife, for which he is now very grateful. Her attorney raises the issue of the division of marital property. At her request, both maintained personal accounts, but had a joint account for household expenses. Bank mandates paid so much monthly from each personal account until Mrs. Holliday took the liberty of canceling hers 10 months before their separation. This did not prevent Mrs. Holliday from spending money on her adultery, but she used only the joint account, which by this time held only Mr. Holliday's funds. In total, she spent more than £47,000 on Bryant and herself, funded by Mr. Holliday. Their emails and messages about it say gloatingly, The invoices for their hotel room and the bill used are contained in documents, which I will shortly provide to the court. This was not once or twice, as she wants us to believe, but over a period of 15 months, meeting at least 6 to 10 times a month, if not more. Mr. Holliday's neighbors claim that a man remarkably similar to Bryant was often at their home when Mr. Holliday was away for a few days because of his work. One or two occasions may be remedied by labor and goodwill on both sides, but such a perfunctory breach of the sanctity of marriage means there is no hope of reconciliation. The £105,000 bill was for house extensions or moving house. Mrs. Holliday has not contributed a penny to it in the last year, while Mr. Holliday has continued to pay £6,000. Mrs. Holliday did not pay the rental value of the car she drove. She specifically put it in Mr. Holliday's name so that he would pay for it. Her texts and emails show that this is exactly what she did. Any money Mrs. Holliday feels she is entitled to is more than offset by the amount she owes Mr. Holliday for the theft from the joint account. Judith's attorney stood up and stated that it was not theft. Dawn said it was a matter of interpretation. Judith, her father, and the lawyer were not amused. I only smiled complacently. Dawn continued. Prior to the marriage, both parties entered into a prenuptial agreement. Judith's solicitor interrupted her. We challenge the relevance of that document. In our opinion, this document misapplies the law. Dawn continued. It was drafted by a learned friend of mine, looking at Solicitor Judith. It allows for the division of marital property, but does not allow for alimony to be paid to the injured partner. Mr. Holliday owned the house before the marriage. There was no mortgage because it was bequeathed to him after his parents died in a car accident. Mr. Holliday's accounts at the time of the separation are reflected in this document. Excluding the £105,000 already mentioned, his assets amounted to £34,900. Automobiles are excluded from all assets. Our investigation into Mrs. Halliday's financial situation revealed that she was aware of assets worth £53,400 after the marriage. Mr. Halliday was aware of these accounts. We discovered that she had 2 other accounts. Judith's sigh made everyone look at her. She looked at me, but I only held back a complacent smile. She looked really pissed off. Dawn continued. At the time of the separation, Mrs. Holliday had £217,674 in the 2 accounts. I have made a record of this in the documents I will present to the court. I ask that the assets be divided in the normal way. Mr. Holliday, although unfairly dismissed for standing up for himself, is not claiming any alimony. According to the prenuptial agreement, the adulterer pays all expenses, so I will send my account to my learned friend later today for settlement in the usual way within 7 days. Judith's lawyer stood up. My lord, I dispute the amount Mr. Holliday is demanding. The 2 accounts in question are her pension savings, which had to be withdrawn due to financial changes, so they should be ignored. They should have been reinvested, but due to her emotional state in relation to the divorce, this did not happen. My client disputes Mr. Halliday's claim that she owed him over £47,000 in respect of the household account. As I have asked previously, I am seeking advice. Dawn replied, The payments on this account match the bonuses she received in her job. Again, the relevant documents refute the claim that these are her retirement savings. The sheriff retired for lunch, but not before asking Judith's attorney to speak with his client to confirm the truth or untruthfulness of the statements made in court this morning. He didn't like being lied to, so he hoped for the truth. After lunch, Judith's attorney stated that the facts reported by Dawn were true. The sheriff granted the divorce and ordered her to pay me £118,000. He disregarded £105,000, as these sums amounted to what she had spent specifically to humiliate her husband. In summing up, he expressed his displeasure at her behavior in relation to adultery and the fact that she had concealed her assets. Avril's article in the newspaper was excellent. It covered all the salient points except for the amount awarded. Judith, Bryant, Harvey, and Bennett were named and shamed. I was happy to be rid of this whore, but I wanted more, much more. Judith and her family had always been staunch churchgoers. My non-attendance didn't suit them. 2 weeks later was Mothering Sunday. I can only imagine their shock when they came out and saw numerous, at least 60 pictures of their daughter with Bryant and another 20 pictures of the minister with the wife of a local politician. Danny had set up the camera a day early, as the room was not booked that day. It wasn't until we were reviewing the footage that we noticed the priest. From the looks of it, all the parishioners were on edge. The priest had to run away from his wife's brothers. Judith's father almost had a stroke. What's in the 10 Commandments? Thou shalt not commit adultery. Maybe that's the one they should have paid attention to. 5 weeks after that, I was back in court against Bennett, Harvey, and Bryant. Avril was in the reporter's box again. Bennett's lawyer tried to get her removed, but the sheriff decided the case was in the public interest. Dawn called me to testify. I sat in the box for over an hour before she finished talking to me. I detailed the instances when Harvey had ordered me to fill in for Bryant at work, about the canceled vacation and the lack of payouts. When I checked the dates of withdrawals from our joint account, they matched. When I told Bennett about it, he only laughed. He knew about the affair since Bryant had openly bragged about it. I detailed how I had discovered texts, emails between the four of them, revealing their collusion. At the end, I reported that I was not paid for the period of my termination, as well as the amount paid to Bryant in my stead. Dawn's last two questions were, how would you describe the relationship between Bennett, Harvey, Bryant, and the other employees, especially over the last 15 months? I answered, I was treated with disdain. Harvey threatened me if I complained about covering for Bryant or having to fix his shoddy repairs. Bennett would just look at me and smirk. My so-called co-workers seemed to know jokes I didn't. They used my integrity to play tricks on me as I did my best for the company. Harvey even made me use my own cell phone to save the company money. He put a tracker on the company's SIM card so Bryant would know if I was coming. She asked, if you had known before, would you have worked as hard for them? I replied, no, I would have quit. I had offers, but I decided loyalty was a good trait to have. Dawn filed all the paperwork with the court. Copies of emails, texts, my business records and statements, payments made and due. Bennett's attorney tried to argue that I made up all the facts about non-payments, bullying, and more. I keep exemplary records, and he was unsuccessful. His attorney began his defense by stating that his client was not served with the documents that Friday, which the court had already heard. They weren't served on him until much later, so he didn't have time to study all the charges against him. I figured he was trying to make up for the fact that he hadn't been able to get anything from me. Dawn stood up and turned on the tape of me handing Bennett the papers, complete with time and date. The lawyer was angry at Bennett for misleading him. He asked for a continuance so he could talk to him. The sheriff gave him 20 minutes. Upon his return, the attorney called Bennett to testify. He accused me of not being paid due to an oversight because of customer termination problems. He notified the finance department to get me paid immediately. His attorney did not inquire about his knowledge of the affair or his involvement in it. Bennett was about to leave the witness stand when Dawn stood up. "One moment, Mr. Bennett," she smiled. Beware of her smile. I'm about to fry you. "Mr. Bennett, do you actively recruit people for extramarital affairs during your working hours?" Both Bennett and his lawyer looked at her. Bennett stammered, "No. Occasionally these things happen, but I don't hire people based on that." Dawn lowered her gaze to the paper in front of her. "Mr. Harvey, fired from previous employment for false reporting and adultery with secretary. Mr. Bryant, fired from his previous position. Mr. Carter, previously fired due to adultery with 3 women at his workplace. Mrs. Simmons, fired due to adultery at her previous place of employment with the husband of the owner's daughter. She spends 2 days a week in your office, doesn't she? Harvey, Bryant, Carter, and you share her sometimes. You talk about the wives of other employees you've entertained. You share your sexist jokes about horny husbands like Mr. Holliday who were decent men and foolishly confided in you." Bennett's supportive wife came out. Tell me why you think hiring people is not pimping, not soliciting prostitution. After all, that's exactly what you're doing. Bennett blushed and couldn't answer. Bennett's attorney tried to prevent him from answering, but the sheriff decided that the question was legitimate because there was a complaint against him. Bennett was unable to answer. The emails you sent to Mrs. Holliday about how to supervise her husband, were they the actions of a caring employer? Did they comply with health and safety regulations relating to the care of the physical and mental health of your employees? When you found out about his wife's affair with your work partner, you did nothing to inform him. Is this the act of a caring employer or a predator who is so keen to hurt someone because they are so much better than you? The only thing that made sense was not wanting him to leave because you needed his skills, but even then, you bullied him with Harvey's help. Sent him away so Bryant could entertain his wife. A caring employer. When he found out about it, instead of helping him, you ridiculed him and then unfairly fired him. Without him, we see what your company has become. All of these actions constitute bullying and harassment in the workplace. That's what you are, a bully and a predator. Dawn continued. Who came up with the idea that Bryant should entertain Mrs. Holliday in order to screw Mr. Holliday? Bennett lowered his eyes. The sheriff told him to answer. Bryant. He hated Holliday. He knew the man was a better engineer, but that wasn't all. Why did you agree to this? I thought Holliday was a loser. He could be lost in a crowd. It was fun to watch that deluded bastard know nothing. It was no longer interesting to listen to Bryant talk about Judith and what bad she was. We planned for him to find out. We thought he'd capitulate. We could have wiped his nose for months, cuckold. But he fought back. He cheated us out of everything we had. All the clients who used him left us. Bryant is so afraid to go outside. Harvey shits himself if his name is mentioned. I looked up when he said they developed it. No wonder Bill kept quiet. He was in on it. They saw me and laughed at me after all. Screw them. Dawn continued. Whose idea was it to ask Mr. Holliday to pay for all the room orders? Harvey. He disliked Mr. Holliday as he always showed him up as a bad manager. A Holliday? Bryant and Harvey. I laughed so hard I agreed. Dawn said quietly, Stealing Mr. Halliday's salary? Bennett hissed. His lawyer stood up, disputing the phrase. The sheriff allowed it, since that was what they were doing in this context. Bennett said, Harvey and Bryant, I went for it. We knew from Judith that he never checked the accounts, so he'll never know. Why did you fire him for no reason? Bennett was furious. No reason. That bastard let everyone know what we did. He made fools of us. He stood there with an evil smirk on his face and watched Bryant almost throw up. He crapped his pants. The look in his eyes said he hated us. I didn't realize he was so angry. If I had known, I never would have gotten involved. If I had left him there, one of us, or perhaps all of us, would have been looking over his shoulder, waiting to see what he would do. He put laxative chocolates in the kitchen. People had to stand in line to use the restroom. A lot of people had accidents. No one saw him, but we know it was him. Dawn said quietly, As with everything, you accuse Mr. Holliday with absolutely no evidence. You bullied him, stole from him, because you're jealous of the kind of man he is. You're pathetic. Dawn sat up. The sheriff tried not to laugh as Bennett explained the predicament the officers were in. He would talk to Dawn about it later. In his opinion, it was completely justified, and if I had been brought to trial and found guilty, he would have admonished me. Bryant spoke next. He told his lawyer that it was just a little fun to get back at me. Judith and he got close, thinking up ways to humiliate me. This went on much longer than expected. Over the vacations, I was just floored. Dawn asked just one question. Did you ever pay for the room you used or the beer you drank at his house? Bryant lowered his eyes. No. Things got even worse for Harvey. Dawn accused him of falsifying pay and annual leave records. She made sure his deception was on the court record. If the Bennetts went bust, which seemed likely, no employer would look favorably on him. The sheriff postponed sentencing for 2 weeks. Before the deadline came, he asked Don if I had been paid as Bennett had suggested. It was a negative answer. In summarizing his findings, he left them all unsupported. He admitted all the complaints in our favor. He awarded me £200,000 for their actions, £33,000 for non-payment of wages. He made a further order that none of them were to receive a penny of wages until all payments to me had been made. If an attempt is made to go bankrupt to avoid this, he has records showing that the firm's bank balance was in excess of £2 million. He will put them in prison for a long time. He made Bennett responsible for my legal fees. I was paid in full the next day. Bennett paid Don's legal fees, the full amount, no buddy rates. I enjoyed the freedom. I felt better than I had in the last few years. I did some counseling and repair work that convinced me that instead of working for someone else who was screwing me over, I should work for myself. The biggest expense was specialized diagnostic equipment, costing upwards of £20,000 to £30,000. Bennett decided to liquidate the company before he lost everything as he had few customers left. On the day of the sale, Danny went there to try and buy the equipment on my behalf. I knew they wouldn't let me in. I set a budget of $30,000. The catalog had the first 4 items I really wanted, but I expected each of them to cost $10,000 and up. I was very surprised when Danny called and said I had all 4 for $17,000. I told him to try to get as many of the items I had marked down as possible. Later, he called back. He had spent $30,000, but there were 2 items left on my list that I had put a limit of $3,000 on. If I wanted them, he would loan me the money for them. I told him I didn't need the loan, but I wanted to get them if possible. With them, I started a company called Halliday Mechanical Services. I leased the van because the cost was about the same as when I bought it, but I didn't expect to get a good price in the future. I contacted my previous customers and was soon very busy. I received calls from several of Bennett's former co-workers who were hoping I would hire them. Not a chance in hell. One afternoon, I found myself driving home not far from the hotel Judith and Bryant were using. I bought Danny a few beers, but did nothing for Kate. I called and was delighted to find her working at reception. She smiled at me. "What can I do for you, sir?" She was great. She was a beautiful girl, but now she was fully a woman. Danny wasn't lying when he said she had the kind of body one could only dream of. I liked her smile right away. "Kate, I'd like to take you out to dinner to thank you for what you've done for me with Danny. If there's anything else you'd like to do, I'd be happy to do it. I owe you a lot." She smiled again. "You can take me to dinner tomorrow at 7. I finish at 6, but I'll shower here and try to look presentable for you." It was my turn to smile. "You are much more than presentable. You are beautiful even in your corporate clothes. I'll be here on time. Thank you for not brushing me off." We exchanged smiles and I left feeling like I had won the lottery. I was glad my job the next day was close to home and went smoothly. I finished early and came home. Showered and shaved, then started thinking about what to wear. I wanted to make an impression, but I wasn't sure what exactly. I felt worse than a 15-year-old on a first date. I realized that my closet needed an update. I was in place at 6:45. I was very nervous. She showed up a few minutes later. She was stunning. She was laughing at me. I realized my jaw had dropped. "I'm sorry, but you look absolutely gorgeous." I admitted, "I haven't had my tongue slurred like that since I was 15. She laughed and held out her hand to me. She took me to a restaurant. I don't remember what I ate, but I can tell you it was the best night of my life. After eating, we went to the lounge for a drink. I was glad I took a cab. Even if I hadn't been drinking, I don't think I would have been able to drive. She is very intelligent, and we talked about many topics. She never criticized my views, but made me explain when they differed from hers. We gently discussed our differences and learned so much more because of it. Her laughter lit up the room. It was after 10 o'clock when she said she had to go, as she had duty at 7 in the morning. I told her I would take a cab, but would take her home before I dropped her off if she wished. We did just that. She stopped about a half mile from my house. Before we left the hotel, I said, Kate, I came tonight because I am indebted to you for what you have done. I have never enjoyed an evening like this before. I'd like to ask you to meet me again if you don't think I'm too frank. She kissed me in response. She pulled out my cell phone and asked me to open it. She entered her number in there. I gave her mine and my email since she said she would send me her lists so I would know when she was available. We dated for 3 months. She's so sweet. I'm just trying to convince myself that she's another Judith. I know she isn't, but when she's working, I have another life. I've been spying on Bryant. Gradually, it's getting easier for him to go outside. He stopped when Harvey got a good beating. I was suspected, but I had an alibi since I worked at a factory 100 miles away and had a few other people with me. Bennett was a lot easier. He likes to have a good drink at the golf club, so he was caught 3 Fridays in a row over the legal limit. He was banned from driving for 10 years, must pass a sobriety test, and retake his driving test before he can be issued a license again. In total, he was fined £5,000. His wife is said to have kicked him out of the house and is divorcing him over adultery, demanding every penny she can get. But Bryant is personal. Eventually, I caught him walking through the park towards the pub. I beat the shit out of him again. The next afternoon, I was at home with Kate when the police called about the attack on Bryant. I had to tell them I didn't have an alibi. I didn't want to drag a friend into something that could lead to jail time. Everything I was wearing, clothes, mask, underwear, gloves, etc., was burned and completely destroyed before I got home. I didn't say a word to him. Kate laughed as she told the officers. I wouldn't have had the strength since we'd spent all day in bed. The policeman drove off. I looked at Kate. She was smiling. I took her hand and pulled her to me. And so we got down to it. Next chapter. At work, everything that could go wrong went wrong. Every time I fixed one part, another part failed. It was an older model, and I had already told them it needed to be replaced about 2 years ago. A new machine had been ordered, but it was due in 6 months, so I had to repair it. 2 days turned into 4. Kate and I talked on the phone. I loved hearing her voice and listening to her talk about her day. She laughed when I told her about things that were going wrong. The time alone made me look forward to the future. After Judith, I never looked for another partner, as I didn't feel I could trust again. Kate said she waited until I was ready. I thought about my life without her, and it would be disgusting. If anything, it would be worse than what I had with Judith. If anyone existed for me, it would be Kate. I knew I loved her more than I'd ever loved anyone before. I needed to talk to her about it and what I needed. That day when I got home, she worked until 11 p.m. so I didn't see her. I was busy putting together an invoice for the job when the doorbell rang. I was surprised to see her there. She looked worried. I invited her to come in. I wanted to kiss her, but she pulled me away. Now I was concerned. She spoke softly, almost sadly. Adam, while you were away, Judith was at the hotel with her firm making a presentation. Afterward, she spoke to me. She knows we've been seeing each other. She asked me to ask you to talk to her. You have not spoken once since the documents were served. She will meet you wherever you wish. She said she has no intention of hurting us. She wants to explain everything to your face. I'm worried that you still have feelings for her. You never mention her. She's more experienced than me, so your life would be better than what we did. I don't want to lose you, but it's better to lose you now than later. She was almost sobbing when she finished. Kate, while I was gone, I thought about you a lot. I love you in ways I never thought possible. I've never loved anyone the way I love you. I kept you at a distance because I was very much afraid of being betrayed again, though every conscious thought in my brain said it would never do so. I never mentioned Judith because I feel nothing but contempt for her and for myself for letting her treat me the way she did. Judith is right. It's probably time to talk. She knows I will never forgive or forget what she did. She doesn't have any feelings for me, and I don't have any for her. You said you waited until I was ready. You were willing to wait because to you I was worth it, especially if I was with you at the end. I kept telling myself over and over to let love in, but I was so scared. You took that away. I want you in my life. Kate threw herself into my arms and kissed me. She said, I have a check in case it rains. Don't forget. A week later, I was talking to Judith at the small bar that nestled between us. She looked like she had lost a little weight and confidence. We ordered coffee. She started, Adam, thank you for agreeing to meet me. I can see that Kate is going good for you. You've never looked so happy in the last few years, if not your whole life. She's not like me, so take a chance. She's a beautiful woman. I want to apologize, even though I know that word sounds ridiculous coming from me, the nasty bitch. I've been thinking for a long time about why I ruined our marriage. At first I wanted to blame you, but Janine wouldn't let me. She made me realize how much I hurt you. I found a counselor who helped me learn the truth about myself and why I did it. I still have a lot of work to do. I could go on for weeks telling you about this, but I'll be brief. I've always been an egotist, a narcissist. I like to think I was better than others. When I met you, I saw a caring, loving man who was completely unaware of the impact he had on others. Because of your character, you could get any woman you wanted. You are so conscientious about everything you do. I loved this man, a feeling I had never felt before. You loved me, and because of that love, you would give me anything I wanted if you could. A diamond on our honeymoon, even if it meant we couldn't afford the tour you really wanted. Over time, I began to see your efforts to please me not as love, but as a sign of weakness. When we talked about children, I wanted one at first, but having lost track of who you were and, as a result, my respect for you, I decided against it. Once again, you didn't fight back. You always put me first, and I never realized what that really meant until it was too late. When Bryant and I met at an event, it was a fascinating conversation with your mortal enemy. I told him too much, and we met several times, talking mostly about you. He latched onto my disrespect for you. A few weeks later, he seduced me, even though I didn't resist. But you would have been a 100 point, and he would have been a 1. I kept coming back just for the thrill of doing it behind your back. My conscience was disgusting, but I took my self-loathing out on you. I made your life a living hell. In fact, hell would have been a better option. The need to humiliate you only grew. I still can't understand why it occurred to me. How could you humiliate yourself if you didn't know? Why did I treat you that way? I was just shocked when Bryant talked about coming to that holiday in your place. I knew that holiday was supposed to try to fix us, but once again, excitement and stupidity took over. Harvey and Bennett were in on it. I hadn't realized until that moment that Bryant was telling them everything. I was tormented by my conscience and became an ice maiden, rejecting your attempts at lovemaking because I didn't want to experience love. I was so disgusted with myself. I knew you didn't deserve the way I treated you. I didn't know until the trial that they orchestrated this, put up the pictures to publicly humiliate you. I'm very sorry. Those 2 days with Bryant should have been the last of my life. If I had known what you already knew, I never would have gone through with it. Listening to Dawn about the divorce and the case against Bennett made me feel so guilty. Because of my stupidity, a lot of shit came down on you and you didn't deserve any of it. I was so ashamed of the way I acted. I realized that the only person who was truly humiliated was me, and I deserved it. I couldn't believe I'd wasted my money on that bastard. When we came out of the church and saw our pictures and the priest's pictures, I realized you were behind it. I was mad as hell, but my conscience kept me going. You deserved it. That's when I sought counseling. After that incident, I caught Bryant and got my own revenge on him. It was at the club. She smiled, adding, I heard he wasn't working anymore, but he never got caught. Dad and my brother caught him and made him give me all the money back. I noticed it, but I didn't know the reason why. I'm sorry I was such a self-centered bitch who mistook love for submission, caring for weakness. I'm moving to another branch to get out of this town. All I get here if I go outside is a room. I need a fresh start, a chance to be a good person again. I may never find someone as good as you, but I have only myself to blame for losing you. I misinterpreted everything you did because of love as weakness, whereas it's strength. You didn't do anything wrong. If I can give you some advice, some of it I learned in therapy. It's okay to disagree, to want different things, but to discuss them. Don't just back down because it will make the other person happy. Say what's on your mind. Bennett was only right about one thing. You're a hell of a great engineer. I'm not surprised you're doing well. You're a damn good person, just don't believe in yourself enough. Tell Kate about the feelings you're holding in because of me. Be a team player. She'll be good for you. With great sadness, she finished, I'm a damn fool. She stood up and said goodbye to me. I returned home where a worried Kate was waiting for me. I said those 5 little words. Kate, we need to talk. I smiled as she raised her eyebrows. I kissed her gently. I told her everything that had happened, about how Judith had mistreated me, and also about Bryant. I told her how I felt inferior, how I couldn't believe I deserved to live with her. When I was done, she was crying. I cried too. I unloaded on myself for the first time in my life. We finished crying, snuggled up against each other. When we finished crying, she wiped my face. Adam, Judith was right about 2 things. What a wonderful person you are and how little you realize it. Maybe if counseling helped her, it will help you too. When you mentioned the kids, I could tell from your voice how deeply it affected you. It's a lovely house, a large lot, and it could be expanded so you could have a lovely family home. All I can say is that if we were to live together, I would love to have children with you. I'm not Judith. I don't see you as a calm, thinking, weak person. I see a strong person who is always striving to be a better person, to help others. We'll disagree, we'll fight sometimes, but you'll always have my love and respect. Think back to our first night. Throughout dinner we talked, we had disagreements, but we discussed them and learned how different perspectives add to our experiences. We both need to talk, to discuss any problems that may arise. Later, she moved in with us, and we talked about renting her apartment. She wanted to wait a few months to make sure I was happy. A few weeks after she moved in, I was at the safe when she noticed the jewelry boxes. She insisted I get them. I opened the big one with diamonds and told her the story, including the fact that I didn't get to go on a tour I really wanted to go on. I'd purposely kept it from Judith because she'd betrayed me with Bryant. I blushed, taking the small box in my hands. Kate, this is a family heirloom. I gave it to Judith as a gift, but I kept it for myself. It's an engagement ring. I've been thinking about proposing to you for weeks now. I asked your father's permission, and he's thrilled, and so is your mom. Kate, will you marry me? We'll find you a new ring if you say yes. She looked into my eyes, smiling, her tears flowing. She said quietly, yes. She then opened a small box. This ring is beautiful. I will wear it proudly. It will need to be resized. I won't wear the diamond set because of its history. You wouldn't want me to wear it the same way, so I think you should give it to Judith as a parting gift. I contacted Judith and arranged to give her the diamond set. She was very grateful. She said that if she was ever tempted to do something bad, it would remind her of selfless love. I went to several counseling sessions and Kate went with me. They helped me a lot, although not as much as her love. It turned out that Kate really was my kind of love. I was so happy that a lot of people remarked on it. My business was growing by the day. I took on 3 more engineers whom I vetted thoroughly. They were not only excellent engineers, but also reliable, faithful, and in a strong marriage. They wouldn't mess around or put up with a coworker who had cheated on another. So Kate did most of the office work for me when her shifts allowed, but as my business grew, it became more and more. We discussed options. She worked for me full-time, hired office staff. She loved her job at the hotel. It was multidisciplinary. She was often out in front, but she also worked behind the scenes a lot. She had the skills for my office, but if we had kids, we would be looking for someone else. So I took over the office, hiring an assistant who could do most of the administrative work. Kate handled a lot of the accounts, which she said didn't take much time because I was so organized. Kate and I got married in a small wedding. Danny was my best man. Her sister Jacqueline was my maid of honor. Her parents were very happy to see us both so happy. They always treated me like the son they never had. I couldn't have wished for better relatives. Kate made me go on my honeymoon. She organized it especially for me. It included an excursion that I wanted to visit on my first honeymoon. We both enjoyed the tour of ancient sites, although I was more into history than she was. I had to suffer for it as she loves roller coasters, so I got to ride with her many times the next week as we visited several theme parks. As I was driving back to the hotel, she casually revealed that she was a commando. At least I think it was accidental. We had to hurriedly get ready for most meals as we explored each other as soon as we entered the hotel room. A couple months later, her parents were even happier as their first grandchild was born. Kate and I moved into her apartment while the builders renovated and expanded our home. The work was finished a month before our first child, Gordon, was born. He was followed by a sister, Jennifer, and then another boy, John. 11 years later, I have 12 engineers and half a dozen office staff. Cheryl still watches out for the day of the bad secretary. If we're overworked, she leaves my office. Since the firm is small, I know her husband and I won't do anything that could damage their relationship with the employees. I still vet new employees thoroughly. I will not hire anyone who plays games with me. As for Judith, I have seen her a couple times when she came to visit her parents. She's doing well professionally, but she's still single. One day, Kate spotted her at a local restaurant with Janine. She had a very sad and envious look on her face. Kate, our kids, and I were there to eat, and the kids were having fun in the little play park. I pushed their swings and caught Jennifer on the parachute. As we left, we said hello. Judith's adultery turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me as it led me to Kate. Her love and support means everything to me. I've never been happier. The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. So subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.